Hi, everyone. I'm Neha Butcher. I'm the co founder of Atom11, ad automation software for Amazon ads. And welcome to yet another episode of AdVantage with Atom11. So I know that I've been MIA on this podcast series for some time now, but we have been busy doing some amazing stuff. A few things that we've been doing so far. Atom 11 came out of private beta in February this year. And since then, we came out in top 10 softwares in David Zimmerman's list of top PPC softwares in the industry this year. We won the Amazon Ad Partner Awards for 2024 Beyond the Funnel APAC. So that was amazing. And we are now live in over 12 countries. So we're live in all of Europe, US, UK, Australia, UAE, you name it, Mexico, LATAM. So, most countries that you can think of, we are live there, growing super fast. We are becoming more and more customizable and flexible over the time that that we are developing the software. So if you are looking for a quick demo, give me a shout out and I'm going to connect with you. All right, coming back to this podcast. Now, the buzzword today in the Amazon ad space is Amazon Marketing Cloud. We were all at Unbox this year, and all we could hear about was the amazing developments that Amazon has done in the Amazon Marketing Cloud space. And a few months ago, we actually had an Amazon Marketing Cloud 101 with Dustin Wassner. And that was an amazing podcast about Amazon Marketing Cloud if you are a complete beginner in this space. If you haven't checked out that podcast, I would highly urge you to do that, because I think what Dustin had done in that podcast was literally break down everything in the simplest possible language. I'm going to give you a review in a few minutes, but why don't we just go ahead and call Dustin and say him hello. Say hello. Hey, Dustin, how are you?
Good, Nia. It's always good to be on your podcast with you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, this is the third podcast that we're doing with you, right? So you must be doing something right.
Yeah.
We love having you over. Yes, and I think I really wanted to thank you, first of all, because the last time that you came on this podcast, you discussed about Amazon Marketing Cloud in a way that I had never been introduced to it in that simplified way, right? So it was so simple to understand what is AMC, who is it for, what do you use it for, and now I think from there we are like, as Atom11, we are growing from there. We just got our AMC accesses, and it became super easy to dive into things, knowing what we knew, and so all thanks to you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Sometimes it's hard to break down more complicated topics, but it's interesting because at the speed that Amazon works, I feel like some of the things that we discussed are now outdated, which is why here we are again.
Yes. I think that was a bullseye, right? So a lot of things have changed. A lot of good things have happened. AMC is now more flexible. But I think before we get into it, right, let me just, call out the agenda for this podcast. So there are three things that we want to do in this podcast, Dustin. One is we discuss the developments that have happened in the AMC space, what has changed. Number two, we want to talk about how to make use of AMC with the new developments that have come in. And number three, we want to see it all in action. So I think that's how I wanted to go about this podcast. So let me know if you want to add anything. Otherwise, we can get started with a little preview of the previous podcast and then get right into it.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Awesome. So let me first give you guys a little preview of what Dustin and I discussed in the previous podcast before I hand it over to Dustin to talk about the new developments this year. So in the last podcast, what we discussed is what is AMC, right? And I think if I were to just repeat it again, what is AMC is that today when you go to your Amazon Ads console, you see reports. Let's say you have a keyword report, right? What happens in that report is that, let's say if there's a keyword called shoe and 10 people clicked on that keyword, Amazon gives you an aggregated report that, this is the number of impressions you got, this is the number of clicks, and this is the number of sales that you got on this specific keyword. But you don't really know what is happening to each and every single customer who saw that ad on the keyword shoe. AMC changes all of that. Now, with AMC, it's rather than being a report, it's actually a database. So this is that database where Amazon breaks down literally what every single customer has done after they saw your ad. I mean, we can get into more details. There are non-advertising related metrics too, but let's keep it simple for this podcast and talk about the advertising related metrics. So anyone who saw your ad, what has been their customer journey? What other ads did they see? Did they purchase your product? Did they go to your detail page or not? Did they purchase someone else's product? What did they do? And now you have this database that you can query, and you can look at data or analyze data the way you want. Really, sky is the limit at what you can do with AMC. Now, when sky is the limit, it becomes very, very intimidating because you can really do anything. Now you don't know what to do and how to start. And that's what this podcast is about. So I hope I was able to tell you exactly what AMC does and what it is, because that's the gist of our previous podcast. And from here onwards, I think what we're going to do is that we now start getting into more and more details and see how can we get into or use AMC for the first time. This is the first time that you're opening the AMC dashboard. What do you do? Right. So over to you, Dustin. The first thing that I would want you to tell us about is what has changed in this year versus the last time we met about AMC.
Sure. So I think your explanation is spot on. And the only thing that I would add is that I like to break AMC into two different sections. There's reporting and audiences. That's the most 30,000 foot view. Your explanation of the database is accurate. It's just what you do with it. And the big differentiator is last time we talked, you had to have a DSP account running, and that would allow you to get a more holistic view for like the path to purchase, connecting these two siloed parts of your advertising strategy into one holistic view. The update is that you do not need DSP in order to run AMC now. And that was the biggest updated unbox. Now, everyone who's running just sponsored ads can run overlap reports, path to purchase, or create custom audiences and add them to, for instance, a sponsored products auto campaign.
Lovely. I think I just wanted to pause here for a second. I think you said something really interesting. So, of course, the great update, you don't need DSP as an essential requirement to now have AMC. But I think, what do you use AMC with? And I think as is your explanation of, okay, I break this down into reports and audiences. Would love to know that now that anyone can use AMC, what is reports and what is audiences?
So if you have your database that you were talking about full of all of your different actions, the reports that you would create based off of those actions are things like finding the amount of time between the last click and a purchase, or finding the path to purchase. We can cover those a little bit more in detail, I think, later in the podcast, as opposed to creating an audience, which is taking that data and then getting a list of actual finite individual customers that meet the criteria and then serving ads to them based on that criteria.
Amazing. So basically, I can go and say, show my ads to someone who has seen my ad and taken or not purchased my product, something like that, right?
Yes, or someone who has purchased my product 3 times in the last 3 months, but has not yet done a subscribe and save. So what this does is allows us to really fine tune the sales funnel or the customer journey, because now within every, say, auto campaign or exact match manual sponsored products campaign, you might have customers at every step of the customer journey, whereas now you can actually peel them out, become more segmented with your campaigns, which not only enhances performance, but it really helps as far as reporting and telling the story and communicating exactly what's going on in the account and where the lowest hanging fruit is for growth.
So can you give me one or a couple of examples, Dustin, where, the audience that we're talking about is more upper funnel? Because, when I look at all the, podcasts or all the content that is available for AMC, a lot of times, we say that AMC is upper funnel, but a lot of times the examples that are given, right, target audiences which have seen my product but did not purchase or did not subscribe and save. These are more lower funnel. Could you just give me a couple of examples where I could go more upper funnel and target an audience so that I can use it more for brand building kind of activities?
That's actually a really interesting point that you make. So if you were to, because of its nature, nearly all of sponsored ads is not going to be upper funnel. People are already coming to Amazon in the aisle with shopping intent. So you're already catching them in the consideration phase of the customer journey. There's really only one type of ad that actually truly is awareness, and that would be like sponsored display audiences. And we will get into how to add audiences in a little bit, but that is one of the areas where you could create something that says, like, if you're running DSP, serve this ad to everyone who has only seen a DSP ad and has seen nothing else. Aside from things like that, you're going to only be, this is primarily going to help you at the bottom of the funnel. That's just the nature of how it works.
Got it. So for users of AMC for sponsored ads, it's mostly going to be lower funnel, but you can also define within the lower funnel, you can define what's upper funnel and what's lower funnel, right? For example, someone who's either just viewed my ad versus someone who has, like you said, right, bought my products 3 or 4 times, but not subscribed and saved. So you can probably just kind of do the prioritization within the, post the consideration phase. But this is going to be more lower funnel for sponsored ads anyway.
Because by its very nature, sponsored ads is a lower funnel strategy.
Correct. But Dustin, just going one step further, even if I'm talking about someone who's using DSP, right? What kind of upper funnel audiences can I create on DSP?
So you could create reporting or build in things like frequency caps to basically say, like, give me an analysis of the frequency performance if I'm serving a DSP ad in an awareness style off of the platform, and say, okay, here's my performance based on if people see my ad 1 time, 2, 3, 4, etc., and then build reporting or custom audiences based around that.
Got it. There is a section of AMC which is non-advertising. Have you explored that at all?
Yeah, there are a few different paid subscriptions that give you additional data. 2 of them I have not, and those are getting into more like credit reports or vehicle purchase history. So if you deal within those categories, the one where most everybody is going to find it useful is the paid insights for organic data. So what that does is not only go outside of your advertising data, but it brings in all of your organic metrics as well.
Could you give me an example? This is very super interesting, because I think
so that would be like, for instance, anything that shows up on your business report: total sales, organic sales, subscribe and save events, etc. Those are going to be in the paid data set that you can eventually, when you pay for it, query those along with your normal AMC queries.
All right. So before we get into the a quick seed in action section, could you tell me a little bit about what should I do if today is when I got the AMC access? What should I do next? Like, how can I start digging deep in the portal? Because, like I said, it's when sky is the limit, you really get intimidated that, where do I go next?
Sure. It's almost a form of analysis paralysis. There's just so much that you can do that you don't know what to do. And fortunately, Amazon helps us with that, because they give us instructional queries. They give us templates that we can build audiences off of. And they give us almost a set of questions to ask, or a set of audiences we would want to go after as initial starting points. So what I would recommend is, when on your first day, explore all of those default options that they provide you. And I think those will offer a really good starting point.
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion. And if I were to, add in my 2 cents, so the day we got our AMC access on Atom11, we did just that, right? And I can tell you from my experience that the scale up period for using AMC is about less than a day. So, in about 2 to 3 hours, you would have created your 5 audiences and 2 important reports that you wanted to. You might probably fail while creating a couple of reports, but you will learn super fast. And I think the second time or the third time that you're creating your report, you will have your responses like ready. So
Mhm.
that's how easy it is to actually, get started on day one.
Mhm.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Dustin. I think that gives some direction on, what can we do. Now, let's say today is my day one, or today is, just getting started. Can you show us a little bit about how we can, set up our first audiences or set up our first report and, use that data to create sponsored ads?
Yeah, yeah, I have some slides that we can go over, some screenshots that will kind of walk you through. Okay, so what I have here is a few slides that we can walk through that are going to show you some of the things that Neha and I just covered. So what she originally asked is, where do you start on day one? And what we have here is several of the pre-existing audiences, the templates that you can use that I would recommend exploring. These are a few of them. There are more. And so, for instance, if you want to just start out with the one on the top right, audiences that added to cart but did not purchase. So if you click into that template, click on the blue text there, it brings you to this. And what you will do is just fill out this template. You can fill in some of the additional filters that you want as far as specific ASINs that were added to cart but not purchased. This particular query is audience of shoppers with multiple detail page views, but any of them that you click on it will show this. So if this was the add to cart, you could add the specific ASINs. What I would point out here that you have to be careful of is that an audience will fail if you have less than 2,000 people in it. So the more specific you get with audiences or look back periods or adding other specific campaigns into these filters, the smaller it's going to get and the higher likelihood it is that it's going to fail. So you want to start off by going, I would say, more broad as far as cutting your teeth on this the first time. Another thing I would point out is that the auto adjust date, that's a really good functionality to have, is yes. What ends up happening is this is going to, every single night, this is going to run in the background, this audience that you create. It's going to remove all the customers from that audience, rerun this query based on the new last 30 days date range and repopulate it. And it's going to adjust that date, assuming that you have yes to auto adjust dates set on. So if you want just a static date range, you would set it to no, but there aren't really a lot of use cases you would want that. So before I go any further, I'll pause and just throw it back to you, Neha, if you want to ask anything or add any comments about this.
Yes, I actually wanted to ask about ACEs to include, right? So when I tried for the first time, I actually added ASINs to see, for the top selling ASINs, which are the ones, which is the audience, which is adding my products multiple times or looking at my products multiple times, on the detail page. But I think that's probably why the report kept failing in the beginning, was because I was going too narrow. And I think I would suggest the same thing, that the first few times when you're doing this, just like keep it as open as you can, so that you can actually see the results and then refine the query if you want. I have a question, and this might be a dumb question, but once you've created an audience, and of course in the next steps you're going to show how to add this to the sponsored product ads and then boost this
Yes.
audience, but is there also a way to, let's say, negate something or optimize this audience once you have already created it? So let's say I've pushed this audience and I'm getting certain results on this audience when I push it to sponsored product, and now I want to, if it's probably not performing well, then I want to make it more narrower. Is that possible to do it on the same audience, or do you have to come back, create the audience again, and then repush it?
You would create a new audience. I would point out that if there are things that you want to add in addition that aren't on the template and the query editor where you use the SQL to create your queries, they're the same exact thing. They pull from the same data set. Everything is the same about them. Amazon just gives you this nice pre-formatted template to enter those things in. If the things that you want to add or remove or modify are not on this template, that's where you get into having to actually modify the queries themselves. That's definitely a step up, definitely more advanced with AMC. And I think that most people are going to be served very well by just starting out with these IQLs, but just a word of caution, but also encouragement that these are really good starting points to build additional metrics off of in the query.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that answers my question.
And so once we create the audience here in the template, typically what I have found is it takes about 24 hours roughly for the audience to actually start showing up as a selectable audience in DSP or sponsored ads. And I should point out that when you create an audience here, you can add this in sponsored ads and DSP. It's not just one or the other. So once this audience is created, this is a overview of all of the different audiences that have been created in this AMC account. You will be able to see the status on here, if it's running, if it's failed. And typically when it fails, you can hover over the reason why, and it will say does not have enough members, etc. You can see the size of the audience over in the column a little bit over to the right and get all the AMC audience names. And here's where the magic happens that I think most people are going to be interested in seeing. So what used to be, I think, placement modifiers or something, I really don't remember what it said under ad groups on the left-hand menu, but
placements.
Okay, so it said placements. So what that would allow us to do is go in and modify top of search pages and rest of search. What ends up happening now is when you create an audience for an advertiser, up until that point, it will still say placements. But once you create an audience, when you go in here, it will then say bid adjustments. And you have two options: all placements, which is where your placement modifiers are. And now you have this audiences section. And this is where you add the audience that you created in AMC. So you set up your campaign, then you add the audience to it. And what you can see here is we have two different rows. This is where you add the audience, you add the placement increase, the bid boost for the audience, and you can see the performance for the audience. So what I have showing here is one of the very initial test audiences that I created for one of our accounts at BTR. So there's no performance goals based on this. So ignore the numbers, but rather just focus on the structure of how to get this information. So if you double click in that 900%, that is where I can increase the bid boost for this audience. Give me 1 second.
I have a question. So this is a 900% bid boost that you've added here, right? And of course, I'm assuming that it can go from anywhere from 0% to 900%, correct?
That's correct.
Now, if I already have a bid on a specific keyword for, let's say, $1, and I have a placement modifier of 900%. And then on top of that, I have a placement modifier on the audiences of 900%.
Mm-hmm.
Is that 900% on top of the placement modifier already, or is it separated from that?
And just for fun, let's also add dynamic up and down bidding to that as well. It all stacks, it all multiplies. So that's something that you do need to be careful of, because you can end up with some very high CPCs. But
oh my God.
Let me take a step back and explain exactly how this actually works, though, because what happens is if I have a campaign that I build, say an exact match campaign with yoga mat as the one exact match target, this will continue to serve impressions just as it would for that normal keyword setup without the audience. But what happens here is the ad auction says if the customer clicking on this ad meets the criteria of the audience that was added, then it's willing to boost the bid up to 900%. So what we end up with is a strategy, if you remember several years back, where everyone was running 20-cent bids, 900% modifiers for top of search, trying to force all of their traffic to top of search. It's a similar strategy in this, where we're going to want to run very low bids, run very high modifiers, ideally flowing all of the traffic for this campaign just through that custom audience. I'm finding already that it's a little bit difficult to do that because even if you run, say, a 20-cent bid and a 10x increase to this audience, there's still non-audience traffic that ends up flowing through. And so it's difficult to get such a difference between the two that you can cut off all of the non-audience traffic entirely, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And that's probably why, even though you have a 900% bid adjustment, you have a higher impression on all audiences and a lower impressions on audiences from AMC. And I'm assuming these two impressions are exclusive to each other, are they?
So the way they do this is a little bit confusing. To find when you add an audience to a campaign, you've essentially created two audiences. You have the original audience and you have the new audience. So I have my people who met the criteria of the audience and I have the people who did not. So there's essentially two audiences within that campaign. Because we're being so restrictive with AMC audiences, we're just naturally going to have a significantly lower amount of traffic, impressions, and spend coming through that meet the criteria of the audience. And so when you're looking at the all shoppers row that was on the table, it's almost always going to be higher than the AMC audience is itself, unless you can really force that with the bid boost and other different ways to boost it to push all of the non-audience out. Another thing that I would mention that's kind of an interesting dynamic on top of your bid ops is that because we have two audiences, each of those audiences also has top of search, product pages, and rest of search. They all have performance. So now when you look at your top of search performance for that campaign, you have to consider that this is factoring in two different audiences into that, one of which might be having a bid boost applied to it.
The analysis for advertising is going to get very complicated.
Yes, it is. And that's why I would recommend just start with the IQLs. I'm going as deep as I feel like we need to on this, just to point out these factors. They aren't necessarily things that should keep you up at night, but they are just things that you have to be aware of, that when you're going into this, there are a lot more levers to pull now. And so just to be aware of them is really good, but still jump in head first with the IQLs, just get the campaigns running, get your feet wet with it, and just start learning from there.
Love it. Let's get back into the presentation and see, how do you take the next steps?
Sure. So you go into, you've created your audience, which we went over in the prior step.
Mm-hmm.
Having trouble with my mouse here. We've created our audience. We can see that our audience is now completed. It's successfully gone through. We go on to this tab and we won't see this table yet because we don't have the audience added. We click on this blue button to add the audience to the created campaign and we get this pop up. And what will happen here is you will increase bids on a custom audience. You select this, pick this drop down, and you will see all of the AMC audiences that you have created. You pick the one that you want and enter the bid boost in for it. Once you add that, it will populate on this table.
Great. And what happens if I don't bid boost? So there was another one, right? Don't increase bid for an audience. So then you will just be able to see the audience and their performance, but you are still going ahead with the same bid, correct?
Neha, honestly, I've never added an audience where I don't increase bids for an audience. So I don't really know what happens when you select that.
I think what's going to happen is there are a lot less impressions for that audience because, like you said, the audience that you've selected is so lower funnel that it's the number of audience or the number of customers in that audience is going to be low. So probably you would not see a lot of impact if you do that, I guess. But you know what? Maybe I'll post an update.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that just is like a default option to where you don't even add an audience, because the whole premise around this is the ability to boost bids for the audience. Yeah. So if you don't increase bids for an audience, it might just be a matter of you don't add an audience, which I don't know why that functionality would even be in the pop-up.
No, I think this is where and again, I am just thinking ahead. I haven't tried this out yet, but I think what probably happens could be that you can have 5 or 6 different audiences. You don't increase bid for any audience. They come in, you see the performance, and then you can go ahead and increase the audience bid for the one which is performing well. I'm just contemplating. I don't know. That could probably be.
Well, at this point, I know you can only add one audience to a campaign.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, that's all that they're letting you do. I can't imagine adding multiple audiences. That would be a lot of levers to pull. But conceptually, I don't think you'd need to, because all you have to do is build your one audience that meets the criteria of if you wanted to add multiple audiences.
Makes sense. Got it. All right. So that's how we are adding different audiences. And once all these audiences are added, we can also now look at how they are performing on different sponsored product campaigns. My suggestion, and of course, I'm pretty sure this is what Dustin is going to suggest too, definitely go out, test out these audiences, see how they perform. And, from there on, more complicated stuff will follow. But, this is like day one. You should definitely do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Now that we've created audiences, so audiences are more actionable, right? Like you can actually take some action on, using your bid boosts. And please be very careful with bid boosts, because your $1 bid can actually be a $200 bid with the kind of placement modifiers that are available today. But this is more actionable in terms of, taking direct action on your ads and modifying them. But there is another feature that you talked about, which is reporting. So let's talk a little bit about reports, what kind of reports are available, and how can we use those reports to make better decisions on sponsored ads. And of course, I know, how DSP can be made better, but how can we use those reports to make better decisions on sponsored ads?
Mm-hmm. Right. So in the same way, when we were looking at the IQLs for the audiences that we want to create, we also have IQLs for reports that we want to generate. There are many reports that we can choose from that Amazon has provided a default IQL for. One of the most popular ones that I have found in the space so far is path to purchase. Everyone is very interested in this. And so these are some of the different path to purchase queries, the main one being path to conversion by campaign and path to conversion by campaign groups. And just to quickly go over those, because I'm sure so many people will be interested in the path to purchase report. If you run the path to purchase by campaign, what you'll end up getting is a report that breaks out every single path with the campaign name in it, versus path to conversion by campaign groups gives you every path to purchase, but it rolls those campaign names up into just ad types. And we can go over an example of what this first one, campaign groups, looks like. And then I can explain a little bit better once we have the visual how that's different from path to conversion by campaign. But what you do is you just go into each of these, any of them that you want, and it's the same setup as the audiences, where you will enter the details that you want of the report, the date range, and any of the specific restrictions that you want to place. So if you want to see path to conversion based on a certain campaign, because you want, for instance, say that you set your accounts up with one ASIN per campaign, and you want to find the path to purchase based on an ASIN. There's not an easy way to do that, but if you have all the campaigns that contain that one ASIN, then you can just add those in as the different campaign groups, and the report will provide that to you. And so once you enter this in and the report runs, it's the same overview as the audiences, where we can see the status on it, if it's still running or not, when it was run, etc. And this is an example that we have of the campaign group report. So what you can see is, get my mouse here, these are the different paths. Not the easiest syntax and structure to use with Excel, but what we have here is for a path that the first click was an SD campaign, the second click was a sponsored products campaign. When that takes place, this is the performance that you see. when it's only a sponsored products ad that a customer clicks on, this is the performance, etc. And so what you can see here is all the different ad types, including DSP, and questions that we can answer from this are, for instance, what does my conversion rate look like when a customer sees a sponsor brand's video ad? When that is present in the path, what does that do to my conversion rate or my click-through rate, etc.? So I'll pause there and throw it back to you if there's anything that you want to add in here or any questions you want to ask.
Yes, I had a quick question. So let's assume the first path that it's talking about is 1SD to SP. And it says that the ROAS is 5.3x versus the third line item, which is when there is only one SP, the ROAS is 2.2x. Now, what is this ROAS? Is this because Amazon has a last click attribution? So usually the ROAS or the attribution is done to one campaign. How are they showing this ROAS? Where is the attribution going?
It's still going to the last ad, but what we can do now is actually see what contributed to getting people to that last ad. And so it's still helpful to be able to say, if sponsor brand video ad is in the path, what does that do to my ROAS overall, even if it's not necessarily the last ad that was clicked?
Okay, so basically the metrics that is showing is, let's say, impressions is still for the like in this case the sponsored product because that's the last click, but because this person has already seen a sponsored display too, the ROAS is higher. Is that what it's trying to say?
Or the way that you can interpret this, and the data on this admittedly is a little bit thin, so I wouldn't necessarily take this and run with it. You'd want to look at maybe longer date ranges or just ways to get a little bit more metrics to look at. But what I can say from looking at this is when a sponsored display ad is in the path to purchase, you look at our first two lines. Let's ignore that last sponsored display one because the traffic is just so low that it's almost like an outlier. But what we can say is when sponsored display is in the path, the ROAS is higher compared to when it's only a sponsored products campaign.
Got it. And I think so. A data like this or a report like this basically tells the customer that they should be running more sponsored display ads, but not necessarily being able to control that, right? Because at this point, you're not controlling. Oh, no, you can control it, right? You can say that anyone who's seen my sponsored display ad, show them more of my sponsored product ads, right? It actually use this report.
So because of now the ability to create these custom audiences, you could create an audience that says, so for instance, our highest ROAS is assuming that last row is an outlier. We could say, create an audience of people who have only seen sponsored display ads and have never seen a sponsored products ads. And we could add that custom audience to a sponsored products campaign because we can see that the ROAS is higher when someone clicks on a sponsored display ad first. If we run the other report though, path to conversion by campaign, what we can end up seeing then is instead of paths, let me go back here to the report, paths by ad type, we actually see the path by campaign name. Now, this is a significantly more exploded report. It's going to have far more rows on it. But what we can do is actually see the specific sponsored display campaigns that were first clicked on. And if we wanted to get super granular with this, we could say, let's create a custom audience where only customers who have never seen a sponsored products campaign and have only seen one of these good sponsored display campaigns, if it meets that criteria, let's serve them an ad.
That is beautiful. Until now, before this podcast, actually, until like 5 minutes ago, I was thinking that audiences are more actionable, while reports are more like, just understanding that, you should be running full funnel ads and this is how. But this, just going through this example really tells us, how we can use for audiences even better, or actually how to create an audience. I think that's the reason probably why path to conversion is so important, right? It just tells you how to create the audience in a way that it can give you the best results.
Yeah. Yeah. The two at times can be really beautiful. Like they're two sides of the same coin. They speak to each other directly. It doesn't always work like that, but I'm giving you a really low hanging fruit example of how the two work really well together. Another area, I talk about bid ops in our space a lot. I talk to people about it quite a bit. And one of the areas that I think is really helpful is determining what is that ideal time to ignore as far as your date range that you're looking back at. Traditionally, we look at 48 hours for the attribution window, as people call it, right? We don't want to factor that in because the sales are still attributing. Well, because of AMC reporting, we can actually say, what is the average time between my last click and my conversion? And really, now we can actually take a data-driven approach to saying, well, if I have more of a luxury item and the average time is, say, 7 days, it's much longer because it's such a high-priced item. That is really the amount of time that we should be ignoring during bid ops, because if the average time is that, we need to give that more time to have sales attribution. Whereas some items that are, cheaper, they're more of a splurge item, compulsion buy, it might be a lot shorter of a window, and we might be excluding meaningful data from our bid ops. And now AMC gives us those insights as to how we should be doing that.
Yes, absolutely. So this is the time to conversion report that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
What exactly is the time to conversion report called on AMC? I haven't explored that one yet.
Let me see if it's in the screenshot here. No, it's not. We only have the path to conversions. But if you search it, or you can find it on the left-hand menu, or just search that, click attribution, something along those lines, it will show you that report. It has the same template. If you need to, you can copy the query and paste it in. Very easy to run, just like this. And it's going to give you a really, I'd say, more intuitive, easier to read report than the path to conversion like we were just looking at. So yeah, give that one a shot as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's one more report that I want to talk about. So Dustin, I think I've seen pretty much all the content that is out there about AMC right now. And, there's 3 reports that people talk about. There's path to conversion, there's time to conversion, and there is ASIN to search term report. Now that we're at it, and, just one last question from me basically would be, what does this ASIN to search term conversion report talk about? And how can we use that for, optimizing our ad campaigns?
Yes, I've seen that in the space as well. I don't believe that is an IQL. That's going to be a custom-made report, a custom query. But honestly, I haven't dove into that one too much. I have seen people posting about it, but what I would imagine is it gives a far more accurate mapping of search terms to ASINs, because we really don't have that clear connection. We can tell what ASINs are in a campaign, and if you run one ASIN per campaign, then you can map what search terms came from it. But if you don't do that, then you get a little muddy as far as what's going on there. And this would help, I'm imagining, to kind of peel things apart and help you to see which search terms are being driven by which ASINs.
Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of, the bottom selling ASINs or the medium selling ASINs, they usually don't have their own campaigns, right? Especially for the ones that have a large catalog. So those are the kind of ASINs where I think, that report is going to be really useful. Sorry about that. Lovely. Well, Dustin, this was such an amazing podcast. I think I learned a lot, not just from, if you were to see Neha prior to this podcast and Neha after this podcast, I think I learned a lot in terms of how can I use reports, how can I use the audiences. I've kind of started delving deep into creating my own audiences and my own reports, but I think just marrying the two is something that I learned. If there's one thing that I can call out, right? Marrying the two is what I learned out of this podcast. And I think this is also probably the first time that we saw, in action, exactly how, someone would go in, find their first audience, find their first report, how does the report look like? And then how do they finally use that report to, take their action? So I found this podcast super helpful. So thank you so much, like always, to, yes.
I think I've been on several, at least 4 or 5 podcasts over the last 2 weeks on AMC, more than I am usually on. None of them have I actually done a full walkthrough like we just did today. So I think that's going to be a really helpful thing for the audience, for those who haven't had the chance or don't have exposure to it yet, have a head start to see actually what's under the hood and how this thing works.
Absolutely. And I think we'll also probably be posting a few more videos after this podcast, now that, we are spending a lot more time on AMC, just like as a team at Atom11. So we'll also be doing that, but I think this is a very good precursor to this. And we'll probably be posting, breaking this video down into short ones, Dustin, so that, we can actually create more digestible content for the audiences. So thank you so much for this. And looking forward to having you on more of our podcasts.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.